So the question is about the Latter-day Saints and family sealings. Susan, it's really important to know. Okay, so non-Latter-day Saints are not welcome into the temple if it's not an open house. Now, before I dive into your answer, the answer for your question, Susan, the Salt Lake City, Utah temple is undergoing massive renovations for the next 4 years. And they're going to be reopening, and they're going to have a grand opening. Do you see where I'm going with this? So if you want to see the temple, like it's the one that people want to see, and you have the opportunity to head to Salt Lake City, Utah, when the grand opening happens, it's free. They don't charge. They usually have tickets that you reserve. But even if field trip, yeah, see, Israel and then Salt Lake City, Utah. So all of those, just to know, like you could go, some of you, there are temple openings throughout the world that are happening. And so if you're in an area where they're opening a temple, you can go in and ask all the questions. They will talk to you about sealings. I wouldn't necessarily say that sealings are connected necessarily to polygamy per se, Susan. Polygamy is not a current acceptable thing in the mainstream Latter-day Saints. The fundamentalists Latter-day Saints do follow polygamy. Those are the ones that you'll see in modest clothing, and they're big in Wyoming. There's some in Colorado, Texas. We had a big thing happen in like 2009, I think. So they do exist. FDLS do exist. With the sealings, yes. You are sealed forever to your family. And I've asked Latter-day Saints this question because what if your spouse passes away and then remarries? And you're sealed to both of those spouses. How does that work in heaven? And no one's been able to give me an answer to that question. Anne's got an answer. And then the other thing is that some of the answers that I get from Latter-day Saints are not really consistent on this point. They will say, so I asked about the Spanish-American War, because that was given to me as an example of why polygamy was allowed, because soldiers were going off and dying and leaving their spouses, and the spouses were suffering, and they had all these kids, and who was going to care for them? So lovingly, they were welcomed into another family. And so the question then is, well, who is that spouse sealed to? The original husband or the second husband who welcomed them into their family? How does that work? Nobody can answer that question either. I do see Anne's response about petitions to unseal. Yes, but that's a difficult one too, because they don't want to unseal necessarily from the person that died, that they've sealed themselves to, and that their kids are sealed to. Because then if they unseal, their kids are still sealed to that person. But then they're no longer sealed, so how do they spend eternity with them if they're no longer sealed? So now they're separate without their kids. Again, it's a big mess, Susan. It's a little more complicated than I think most Latter-day Saints will even get into. I wouldn't say that comes up in regular, everyday, let's have a conversation about this. But certainly they will answer questions about what it means to be sealed in the temple. They're very open with that. They love that part of who they are. In fact, many Latter-day Saints will say that's why they became a Latter-day Saint if they weren't born into it, because they were drawn to the idea of an eternal family. Who doesn't want to spend eternity with your kids and your husband? And so I would say that it's enticing. And that idea of an eternal family is certainly enticing. Whether or not it's scriptural is a different story altogether.